That looks much better. Okay, I think there should only be one audio input of me going. If someone on Twitch can just verify that. But I think we are looking good now. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So welcome everybody. Starting it with some good old technical difficulties as we normally do. So this is the September Game Meetup. This is a meetup for people to talk about the cool stuff that they're working on in the Rust language. And so, if you came out thinking it was a Rust game, sorry, you're in the wrong place. But we have some pretty cool stuff. So a little bit about me. My name is Forrest. I am the host of this meetup. I also do some other stuff, like I run I co-host the Gamedev podcast. I help edit the monthly newsletter. And I created this as like an opportunity for people to be able to come and show the cool stuff that they're working on. And this month in particular, I think we have quite a lot of neat things going on. I'm imagining that. One sec, let me just add a noise canceling filter. I have like a lot of fan noise around me, so I assume it's not great. But okay, that should fix it. Maybe not. All right, so this month we have some pretty cool stuff. We just had the Rusty Jam go on, so we're going to see some stuff from that today. There's a lot of really neat stuff in the newsletter that we might be able to take a look at, and we have some awesome presenters today. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So we are streaming. First of all, we have Fetus Bobitas here, who's going to talk about Murder User Dungeon, which is a project that they worked on for the Rusty Jam.
Yes. So, yeah, for those who don't know, the theme of the jam was illusion of safety. And we spent about 2 days coming up with an idea. And we eventually kind of settled on a game kind of like Five Nights at Freddy's, where you kind of have this feeling of, we wanted to kind of create a feeling of paranoia so that you never really felt safe in your space. And that's kind of how we fit within the theme. So in the game, you are a person living in an apartment and you have to manage human needs. And when they deplete to zero, that's a condition for a game over. And that's the first part of the game. And the second part, we created, you have a computer in the game. And on the computer, there is a simulated, so it's not actually online, but a simulated online game, which we call a MUD, which that just stands for multi-user dungeon. It's kind of like these really early online multiplayer games. So as you progress through this online game, you encounter other players, and when you make enemies of them, they become vengeful and will try to break into your apartment. And that's kind of how we fit into the theme with that. And then, so there's basically 3 events that can happen when you make these enemies, and I'll play them here. So Let me put on the first one. Here we go. So this is one where that was the first one. This is if you leave the door open and do some action that makes you vulnerable. There's a jump scare warning. Sorry. Here, and you get a game over. Uh, you have a second one here, which is if you have to order pizza, and if you uh, don't check, if you have to check the peephole and make sure that it's actually the pizza man and not like actually someone who's mad at you trying to get revenge. So that's what this clip will show. So then you have to go back. So basically, the idea is you have to kind of manage. You want to keep making progress through this game, but you also have to make sure you're checking the door and making sure that your pizza arrives so you can fulfill your hunger need. You have to take care of your sleep and peeing needs. So it's yeah, it's at the end of this clip. I think this is when the real pizza man arrives, and then you get your pizza and you can eat it. And then the last one, this is kind of the last event that can happen uh, for a break-in, is a lock picking one. So that's what this one will show. So the other thing we did is as it gets later, there's a day-night cycle. So as it gets later into the night, there's a function that I'll show later that increases the likelihood of these events to happen. So you kind of hear it now. There's like this lock picking sound effect. So if you check the door, you'll see that there's someone there. So if you can't be like hammering at the keys too hard on the computer, or else you're not going to hear it, and you can hide under the bed and avoid it. And I'll just wait for that to continue. And yeah, so those are the three events we made. So they kind of, the point of these is we wanted them to be unavoidable as you progress through the game. You know, you have to order food, so you have to eventually deal with the possibility of a fake pizza delivery happening. And uh, the door left open is just, you can't be too careless, and the lock picking is just something where you have to make sure you're listening to the subtle background sound effects. So then I'd go over the notable features here. So one of them was this console, which uh, I didn't work on this part, but I was really impressive to see the progression go on with that. And I think it's really immersive, and I like how it kind of blocks your view of the whole apartment. So it kind of, as you're in there, you kind of don't know what's going on in there, and you want to make sure you're looking away, closing it, and checking the apartment once in a while. Uh, we also used a lot of mathematical functions to sort of do different things in the game. So the console animation, uh, the fading out, and the game over, or the game over fading out, and the day night cycle, and the vulnerability for the time of day. We used kind of went back to, I guess, like algebra 2, and did some sine wave shifting. Let me pull that up, and sort of got some functions for how this is basically, as it gets later into the night, this is a factor that goes into calculating how likely a lock picking event or a fake pizza delivery event will happen. Uh, and I guess to end it off, I just wanted to go over like what we learned. And I think the most important thing we learned was that, especially for a game jam, uh, you have to get people into the gameplay fast, because part of the nature of it being a game jam is when people are playing through them, they're kind of expecting, well, a lot of these games are probably going to be unfinished. Maybe all they did was they made this apartment. And if we don't guide the player into finding the core gameplay, which is kind of this labyrinth game that's inside the console, then they're going to think, oh, it's just an unfinished game. They just made a little apartment simulator, which is not what we made. And I think a lot of people may have thought that. So that's what caused me to eventually make this. I made a little video and uploaded it to, that's what's playing here, to sort of uh, explain to people how to get to the core gameplay. And the other thing that we learned was the importance of designing ahead of time. I think we had kind of I think we did we did pretty well considering. Uh, I think it was many of our first game jams, or it was my first one in a while. Uh, but we may have been a little ambitious with our design, and we should have spent more time kind of designing out ahead of time rather than just jumping into coding. So I think that's that's Murder User Dungeon. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, this is super cool. Very big congratulations on yeah, getting this done over the week. And so, a little bit of context with the Rusty Jam. It ran about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think. It was a week-long jam, and lots of people were able to work on any games as long as they used Rust. And so, yeah, I think so. If I'm not mistaken, which place did you get?
We got second place. Yeah.
Second place. That's pretty awesome for sure.
Yeah.
So one thing I'm wondering is what so with like the technology stack, how did you find it for iterating quickly in like a jam sort of setting?
We so for this game we used Bevy, and really quickly, of course I'd have to do more game jams with more people to really come to this conclusion. But what I've noticed is that ECS seems really, really good for game jam. Working with kind of random people you find on the internet, especially with Bevy, we can need to work not only on our own systems, we can also work on our own whole plugins. And then all we have to do is kind of talk and interlock them. We have like some resources that we write and read to, which is kind of how we share information between the console plugin and the apartment plugin. So we found ECS with Bevy to be really effective for something like this.
That's a really cool point, and I think especially when you break it down into the systems and the plugins within Bevy, then yeah, one thing I really like in jams is allowing people to go off and prototype some parts that they want, but then you want to be able to combine them together. And so yeah, that's a pretty great point that through the plugin system you're able to accomplish that.
Yeah.
Um, and then I think another really great point that you made was when you're doing a game jam, you often want to guide the players through an experience. The more open-ended you make it, the more room for error there is. And so I think that this kind of comes into like the idea of polish in a jam, where you get the game that you want, but then you have to spend a lot of time kind of like, how will the user go through it? And like, what can I add to make it nicer, just make it work better? And so for this game, how long did you have to spend on sort of like the polish phase after development, or towards the end of development?
So the polish phase for us was probably, you could arguably non-existent, but it probably, I would have considered it like probably the last. um I it was probably like I woke up early Saturday morning, the day it ended, and that was probably the polish phase. And really it was at that point it was like, hey, our systems aren't interlocking. The part I worked on isn't like interacting correctly with the terminal, or the console we call it, and we need to make this work or else our game isn't going to be a game. That's kind of the discussion we were
Yep.
happening last minute and I think that kind of leads me to the conclusion that maybe we should have scaled down the idea a little bit and take the whole last 24 hours to tutorialize the game and kind of think about user experience and that kind of thing, rather than kind of like these working on adding more jump scares or whatever we were
Mm.
working on at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. And in chat, there's a really great point. Someone said, is so ECS is nice for this kind of game. That's an interesting turn. And so I think this is an interesting point, because when we think of entity component systems conventionally, often you think of many different entities, all like some will share systems, but mainly that we're getting the benefit of just being able to do pure processing and great memory management with it. But when it comes to doing something like this tile map type of game, where you have interactions, you have some story, you have triggers, how did you find that? Like maybe in comparison to like if you're using a conventional like object-oriented sort of engine, how did you find the process for developing a story here?
So I guess I want to clarify. I don't think ECS is like good necessarily for this kind of game. It's more that I think ECS is good for game jams. So I don't necessarily think like, oh, this, if we were to like find the optimal way of doing this kind of game, it would be ECS. But if we continue, ECS is what I'm using right now, it probably just seems to work fine. I'd probably continue using ECS if we were to continue this game. But yeah, for making the story, it well, let me think. I guess I wouldn't say it was the most I wouldn't say that it really helped or hindered the process. It was kind of just I first of all I didn't really work on on that part. That was kind of the console part, so I wasn't
Hmm.
maybe not the best to speak on it. But uh, I guess I can speak for triggering like the events. So yeah, we just kind of had a vulnerability resource, and the systems read the resource and read the time of day and stuff, and do a random roll and see if an event should happen. So I guess that's all I can really speak on it for that. I don't know if I can go uh, more into that considering what I've contributed.
Yeah, no worries. And I think sort of like an extension on this, someone else asked, you talked about like ECS is great for collaboration, but what do you think if this was a solo jam instead?
Uh, that's hard for me to give an objective answer on, just because um, I I guess my experience with game development has been I started with Unity, not with ECS, and moved on to I tried a few like things like I tried Lua and Love, and I tried Pygame, and those ones aren't ECS, and I've done game jams with those, and I wasn't as experienced back then. And now that I am more experienced and I kind of like ECS,
Hmm.
I would use it for any game jam, for a solo game jam. But that might speak to my inexperience. I might want to. I've been looking into like macro quad, so I might want to look into that more before I speak on that.
Yeah. All right. Very good. It was awesome seeing this. And I also just want to mention here at the end, we love to see Crust of Rust notes. Very good learning resource. Very helpful, especially
Yeah.
lifetimes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
All right. Well, thank you very
absolutely.
much.
Thank you.
One. All right. So next up, I think I'm supposed to say one and then hit the button, but I might have done it at the same time. Whatever. All right. So next up, we have Ectin here to talk to us about Cosmic Verge.
Cool, thank you. So yeah, I am trying to develop a very large vision of a 2D systematic sandbox MMO that's kind of built atop a modular self-hostable platform that I'm going to talk a little bit more about today. More specifically, just the technologies that I'm planning on powering it with. It's completely open source, which is kind of key to the self-hosting part. And then the actual game concept is very early in development. I've been really focused on kind of wanting to build up the platform itself and where I want to take that. Because to me the core of the game is less about the gameplay at the moment because I may not get that right on the first pass. And so what I want is a solid foundation for exploring, kind of building. Really. And since February, I've been going overkill on an oxidation project, which is rustifying a bunch of things. So let's talk about that. It's mostly been just me working on things this month. Daxpet has just been distracted by other things in real life, and fortunately, haven't been able to talk too much recently. So I'm not sure what all he's accomplished, but looking forward to seeing some of it. I know working on. So this is the ecosystem. We're going to talk mostly about the high level components here, GUI and Bonsai DB. So GUI is our user interface framework. It's very early in development. But this last month, I focused on getting keyboard navigation working well. I added multi-window support as well as basic window support, meaning that you can actually set the title and things like that, both after you've created the window as well as during creation process. Stuff I just didn't have supported before. Based on comments last month, I added basic theming support so we get some color in here. And then I got us updated to WGPU 10. as you can see, I've got a text input widget, and then list widget. I want to be clarify. This isn't like a table view like you'd expect in most UI frameworks. This is actually more like unordered list and ordered list inside of HTML. Kind of our vision of potentially rendering some sort of that rich text like this outline you see here inside of the application. And then Dax has been working on the grid view. And as you can see over there, I've been working on kind of a form view concept of kind of being able to do more of the CRUD style elements because we're wanting to build our admin tools inside of GUI as well. So BonsaiDB is the database platform that we're building that is inspired by CouchDB, but it's a lot more than that. That's kind of just the tagline that I've picked for this. At the end of the day, it has a key value store, a job system, and you know, meant to be able to go from like a SQLite local only node network all the way up to clustering eventually. We're not there yet. We only have the single server model right now, but we'll hopefully get there someday. But like I said, massive oxidation project. So I ended up getting back onto this instead of continuing working on GUI and getting the demo that I had mentioned last month going, because I got distracted by a thread that ended up mentioning an issue with SLED that seemed very similar to an issue that I had been fighting when I tried to run the unit test suite on my MacBook M1, which ended up being basically a massive amount of memory usage that didn't really appear on my Linux machine. And I tracked it down, and in the long run, I ended up deciding that SLED just wasn't going to cut it in the search for anything better. I ended up deciding just to go ahead and continue looking at CouchDB as my inspiration. They have an append-only B-tree file format that I decided didn't sound too crazy to implement. So last Friday, I asked Dax, and he kind of agreed that it sounded like I could probably do it. So I started working on it. So the overall goals mostly is just to be able to get the ability to have BonsaiDB perform as well as CouchDB. The reason why I want to say it that way is because before I got into this, I sold my last company after building up over 10 years, starting from a single server model with a single CouchDB instance, all the way up to a fully redundant across multiple availability zones CouchDB cluster in the cloud. And so I know that it can work as a platform. And so if I can just at least meet that performance, I felt like that was going to be good enough. And then on top of that, though, I wanted to actually have ACID transactions across multiple collections essentially. And then also, one of the things that I had to build on top of SLED before, as opposed to it being built into kind of our file system storage layer, is the encryption stuff. So I went ahead and built it into the format here. So down here, there's a lot of caveats. I'm not actually trying to claim that I'm doing like incredible performance. This is not how you would benchmark any Postgres or SQLite. This is just the only functionality that I support currently. So that's the only transaction that I can actually, only benchmark that I can perform right now. So that's the biggest limiting factor. The other gotcha is what I'll say on the next slide, which is that it's still in very early development. So on the previous slide, the maximum speed that I reported there was, I think, 2.8 thousand. This morning, I got that up a lot more, closer to 9,000. And this kind of is a point that I don't know where the rest of the benchmarks are going to go. There's a lot more to doing database development than just raw inserts, and append only obviously is going to be faster for a lot of things, but the downside is that you end up having bloat on the disk, and so you will end up needing to compact your databases, which means you're trading kind of current IO for future IO. And so how do you even make good benchmarks for that? So, anyways, long story short, I don't know how everything's going to go. I hope it's going to be at least as performant as CouchDB, because that's kind of what I think is a reasonable platform to build on top of. But I'm hoping that I can be pretty competitive overall against just general purpose databases like Postgres and Redis and so. So that's kind of what I've been working on. So my next priorities are I'm going to keep working on BonsaiDB Roots, which is the project's name. Mostly, I just need to get it flushed out enough that I can actually swap out sleds. So there's just missing functionality, deleting that sort of stuff. Simple details. uh, and then I want to switch back over to GUI and continue getting towards my ultimate goal of finishing getting the port and restart of Cosmic Verge up, which is I feel is close, but I've said that multiple months in a row now. So If you'd like to find out more, here's some various domains and links that you can follow, and I'd love to have anyone ask any questions.
All right, so we have one here in chat. What's the difference between a database having encryption support versus just inserting encrypted data?
So what about, so for example, if a table, I don't have tables, I'm documents, but if you have tables and you have like the name column, for example, you would have to insert that as an encrypted data in the database to store it at rest encrypted if you're doing it on a like at the insert level. That then means you
Hmm.
can't exactly query on those columns anymore very easily. And so by encrypting at the block level, what you can do is that while you're loading up the blocks to inspect them, you can decrypt them, and now your data is already decrypted, and you can actually have the database server be able to execute your queries and stuff on it.
I see. Interesting. And another thing I'm sort of wondering is when it comes to document databases versus relational databases, especially in game development, what are some of the, I mean, you having like done like a lot of work with this, and you are trying to like make some sort of like a real time game. What are some of the like the comparisons that you'd sort of draw as to why to use one over the other?
Well, so CouchDB kind of came like one of the reasons why I picked it was the ability to scale horizontally, and that's one of the questions you asked about last month. Is kind of, how do you end up growing from one server to multiple servers? And document stores kind of are built in a way that it just feels a little more fluid, I guess, from how it's designed from the ground up. Because I guess one of the things I didn't cover is how CouchDB works, and it's kind of clever. Essentially, it works on MapReduce style functionality. Those are views in the CouchDB and BonzID. And so, what you can do is you can have a document as a user, and maybe you want to get the username field out. So you create a view that maps the user records to only return the string value. And in Rust, we get to have this hard coded. So your view types are all there, and the types is great. And so on the server, you're actually writing a little function in Rust as opposed to in CouchDB. You wrote that in JavaScript. And so you end up being able to write both the server side component of your database functionality as well as the client side, receiving the results of the, calling or how you actually invoke the view. So over what key ranges, do I want all the usernames or do I want just the specific one for this ID, that sort of thing. So that kind of basic fundamental design shift from kind of what I call a programmable database versus kind of the schema driven almost dumb database. And yes, I realize you can do stored procedures and stuff, but you understand what I'm talking about there. That you don't really write your stored procedures in Rust. There are some cool projects that allow you to do that, but they're very experimental right now.
I see. Interesting. And when it comes to um like optimizing a lot of this stuff and trying to like reach your best numbers, do you find that you're fighting more against I think the answer is gonna be disk, but like disk versus CPU? I'm assuming that the problem is that you're writing to disk so often, right? And this is what you're trying to
Yes.
optimize.
Yeah, minimizing writes is the biggest win, right? Or minimizing reads too.
Hmm.
So, if I go back to this slide where I didn't actually talk about the numbers because I'm not really trying to chase numbers. I'm trying to make sure I'm not doing anything stupid, right? Like that's really the bar I'm setting for myself is I'm trying to just like if it looks like it should be performant, that's all I'm trying to do right now. I'm not really trying to chase benchmarks. It's too early to try to do that. And I honestly don't want to. That's one of the other caveats is like that's why I'm setting the bar as CouchDB. Like, yeah, I'd
Hmm.
love to beat Postgres on every benchmark if I could, but
Yeah.
like, do I really want to spend time doing that or do I want to write a game? Right. Like
Exactly.
ultimately I still want to write a game. So there are
Yeah.
going to be limits. So once I introduced this cache, like one of the things I wanted to play with was IOU ring versus just regular, standard file system, which is, I use the Tokyo wrapper because that way I can use async in both situations and it makes the code reuse easier. But there was actual differences here. But once I introduced a little memory cache in front of it, I basically couldn't get a difference in the performance anymore. So there's some situations where you're just trying to optimize what you can do without having to touch the disk again. And then minimizing the writes. Like, how did I get from 2.8 to 9,000 this morning? I did it by actually reducing the size of the nodes that I have to write when the table's still growing, essentially. So,
I
like, it's going to be
see.
optimizations like that I may still find tons of these down the road, or I might be at the end of them. I have no idea. So,
Hmm. All right. Well, thank you very much. It's always great seeing what's going on with Cosmic Verge, and I mean, I always love talking about the optimizations that you're working on and stuff like that. But I could talk about it for hours. So,
Yeah, me too.
yeah.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. All right. So I'm just making sure that the Discord audio, or it's not, audio's not sending. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's because when I mute it, it actually dies off.
The fabric or the curtain
All right.
looks
Okay,
looks
audio
like
is now working.
it's
I will
real
restart this
Hello
video.
everyone. Today I want to show you the progress in the RJ3D game engine. The most important parts in the upcoming 0.23 version is the HDR support, is the tone mapping, color grading, gamma correction, auto exposure features, and of course custom shaders, materials, and custom render passes. Let me show you real quick what all of this means. Yeah, that's the standard Great Exponser scene with the HDR materials. As you can see, the curtain has a metal parts on it, and it has correct reflections, and the fabric of the curtain looks like it's real fabric. The stone on the floor, if I disable shadows, it reflects. It has a correct reflections. So the current PBR, the current implementation uses the physically based rendering, which is PBR in short. But the current implementation does not have an IBL, which stands for image-based lighting, and the reflections are a bit more unnatural than it could be, but that will be improved in the next versions. And now let me show you the custom materials. It is in here. Yeah, that's a simple material. It just applies the waving effect for the mesh. As you can see, the light affects the mesh as usual. And now let's see what's inside the material. So let's quickly check what's inside the material. At first, it has a property set which has a diffuse texture and the time property in here. So these properties are directly mapped to uniform values. So as you can see here, the vertex shader for a gbuffer pass has a time uniform, and here we have time property which has the same name. So these are tied together. As you can see, the shader has multiple passes. This is quite common for nowadays render pipelines. Each render pass has a draw parameters, which is basically the pipeline state. It has a face to cal, color write options, depth write options, blending, and so on. And of course it has a vertex shader and a fragment shader. In the vertex shader, it basically just outputs the position and the additional properties of the vertex. And in fragment shader, you may change the fragment or the pixels values. The most common passes for standard for simple shaders that should also the materials that should also be affected by light in the scene. There are three passes: the gbuffer pass, which basically writes the geometry, the information about geometry of the scene in a set of textures, full screen size textures. It writes the diffuse color, normal vector of each fragment, the material properties, which is metallic, roughness, ambient occlusion, and it also writes an ambient lighting which includes the emission maps, light maps, and it also has a decal mask index. So also to make it work correctly, you have to define two render passes for shadows. So it is very simple. It might look very big and complicated, but it is not. If you're familiar with shader making, it will be very simple for you. The way how it works is very simple. It just maps a pass from this list to a pass in the renderer. So the renderer has a gbuffer pass. You can add your own pass, but for simple shaders there are three mandatory parts, which are gbuffer, spot shadow, and point shadow. So also let me show you the way how the engine pass the instance parameters. So it has a built-in variable set, where each variable starts from RJ3D prefix. As you can see here in comment, it tells us that you just need to define uniforms with reserved names, and RJ3D will automatically provide required data to these uniforms. It's that simple. You don't have to pass all the uniform values yourself. The standard values will be automatically provided in your shader. All you need to provide manually is the properties you've defined. So in this shader, these are diffuse texture and time, which will be used to animate the wave. So now let's take a look at the editor. Here is the editor, and let's create a simple scene. We'll basically recreate what we've seen in previous example, and here is the cylinder. Let's quickly add the light source. Yep, here it is. Let's reduce the ambient lighting. Yeah, and now we can modify the material used by this mesh. All you need to do is to go to surfaces, properties, and open the material editor. That's simple. By default, every mesh has standard material with standard shader. All you need to you can set any parameters you want in here. Those include textures. Yeah, we can put a... Why it is not working? That's strange. All right, let's put this one. Yeah, now we have a paper cylinder. Also, we can go to any asset. For example, a door. Yeah, that's a door. That's for my game. Yeah, and here you can modify the properties of the material it uses. So as you can see, it has this material in here, and you can do anything you want with this material. Yeah, that's just the standard scale parameter for the textures. Now let's go back to the cylinder and change its shader to custom shader. Yeah. Oh no, I've set the shader to Veloren material. Okay. Yeah, this one. Yeah, here we go. And now let's apply a texture on it, as usual. All right, it works now. So, and here you can modify the properties of the material, and you can see how it behaves with various properties. This is just the same as you've seen in the previous example. It works really easy. You can apply a material you want. You can change the shader and see the result. I want to mention that the standard shader has two kinds. It has a shader for terrain, which is special, a bit special, and the standard shader you've seen in like few moments ago. The standard terrain shader is a bit different. It has a mask texture parameter, because why the terrain needs it? Because you have multiple layers in the terrain, and you may want to blend each layer separately. So here I added a separate layer on top of base layer, which is layer 0, and I wanna modify its texture. As you can see, let's add more. Yeah, well, I added this texture to the material, and you can now start drawing on it. Let's start. Yeah, that's it. The mask is used to filter the values of layer to prevent it from drawing to other smooth blending. As you can see, it has a smooth border. Yeah, so we cannot use a standard shader because it doesn't have a mask. As you can see, no mask here. But the standard 2-range shader has it. Let me just undo all the changes. Okay, so there's a difference between standard shader and the standard 2-range shader. It's very easy to remember, but it has to be noted. So another thing I want to mention is the HDR support. As you can see, the scene is bright now. So, but when I come closer to the bright light source, it reduces the brightness of the frame, which allows us to see the bright areas. But when I come to dim places, it will increase the brightness. This is so-called auto exposure. In rendering, in tone mapping, the engine also has color grading. It's unfortunate, but I can't show you it in here. But the camera has color grading lookup texture, which is used to change the color space of the scene. So it allows you to do a filmic effects like a green screen filter, which you've maybe seen in Matrix movie, or a very known Mexico effect, where you have everything looking yellowish, and yeah, that's it. It's just easy. So these are the major changes in the upcoming 0.23 version. Let's do a quick recap of all of them. It has HDR rendering pipeline, which includes tone mapping, which includes color grading, which includes exposure, manual or auto exposure, and also the most significant parts of the upcoming release is custom shaders, custom materials, custom render passes. So I hope you enjoyed my video, and yeah, see you on the next meetup. Thank you.
All right, so that was Mr. Demas showing off RG3D. And so there's actually a pretty cool video that came out recently from Games from Scratch. Oh, that's an ad. But this video, definitely recommend checking out. It does like a great overview of the engine, and yeah, you can see what kind of stuff has been going on. All right, we'll be back in just a second. All right. So next up, we have Kevin and True Doctor here to give us some updates on Graphite.
All right. Welcome to the month of September. And this past month, we were targeting towards an alpha release for Graphite. We sort of did not quite meet that deadline, but we are still hoping to get some alpha release content out this month, as well as a new website, which I'll be previewing later on in this presentation. A quick overview in case you're not familiar with what Graphite is. It's an open source 2D graphics editing application that combines both vector and raster-based editing into one. And it also combines the Houdini-like approach of node-based everything procedural pipelines to the basically the application of 2D editing, 2D graphics creation. And that will allow you to, in the future, make both raster and vector content from procedural sources, as well as more traditional style where you just use your layers and you use your tools to just edit photos or create brand new imagery or whatever. And then you can also hook that up to input data or create your own custom node graphs that will create custom procedural content based upon input data or based upon randomized parameters or whatever your use cases are, from game development to photo editing to illustration to graphic design to whatever you need. Yeah, so we have some updates this month. We now have it so scroll bars work with an infinite canvas, so you can use the scroll bars in the document to actually scroll around, and as you continue to move, they will increase and decrease in size so that you can scroll around forever. Because currently we have an infinite canvas, although pretty soon we will be adding a canvas that you have bounds for as well. You can choose between infinite canvas and bounded canvas of a certain resolution. We can now set the stroke weight of lines and pens. We now have set up in the backend cargo deny and its Node.js equivalent, which is allowing us to make sure that we don't accidentally include any copyleft licenses in the code base, either directly or as a transient dependency. We now have a new undo and redo system, which replaces and mostly fixes the otherwise previously very, very broken system we had before. We now also have a new approach to the code where it genericizes how we send messages back and forth between the front end and the back end, specifically for the content of your input widgets. So this will allow us to make it much easier to update various parameters, like all of your tool settings. So you can, for example, give a stroke weight, or you can give the number of points on an ingon, or any various of your many options that your tools will use. And then also later on that will then include your properties panel as well. So you can update those widgets and give it new values and update your shapes. We now have it so that the path tool renders Bezier curve manipulators. So you can see the handle and the anchor points, although currently you can't actually manipulate those. So that'll be coming up probably in the next month. We now have Blender style grab, rotate, and scale with G, R, and S. That will allow you to actually move layers around and rotate them and scale them, and you can type in numbers. That one's very exciting. And finally, we also have a bunch of refactors and code cleanups and bug fixes that have dramatically improved the quality of the code base. And also we have a way of showing the a dialogue when the editor panics. So basically, the user is not confused why the entire thing froze. They actually see the reason for the panic. Oh yeah, and then finally, we're also generating the license notices. So now we are compliant with the open source software that we're using by displaying the licenses for each of those. Oh yeah, and finally, we have some foundations for folders. So I will go ahead and give this a try. So let's see. Here is the local version. So let's see. Yeah, we have scroll bars now work. So if I draw some things, you'll see that we have scroll bars. And now as I move them left and right, they actually shrink. So I can just keep on dragging further and further and further left. And it'll just keep shrinking, so I can just keep on dragging forever because this is an infinite canvas. And now if I wanted to make another shape, for example, then I can zoom out a bunch and you can see my artwork in both locations. So yeah, and that's rotating by accident. So you can now, yeah, exactly. we have the line tool and pen tool, now allowing you to specify the stroke weight. So we have 5, or we could set this to 50, or we could set this to 1. And then also the pen has the same. So if we go over to the pen tool, then we can also set this. And let's say we also draw an ellipse, and we draw a rectangle, and we draw a hexagon. And now we go over to the path tool, and this allows us to actually visualize the points for each of the selected items. So we have this, and we have the points visible. We have the rectangle, we have the ellipse, and we actually see the Bezier curve handles that show, and pretty soon you'll be able to drag these around and actually manipulate the Bezier shape itself directly. And then that will soon after be extended to allow the pen tool to not just draw shape and not just draw polylines, but also draw full-on Bezier curves of arbitrary design. We now have undo, so we can go back and go forward. Oh, and I apparently just crashed it. But that's a great way of showing you the other issue, the other new feature, which is the crash dialog. So we can either hit the button to reload the page, or at any time we can just open up the console and view the direct log itself. Or we can just hit copy, and this actually copies it to the clipboard. Or we can click on this little button, and it opens up GitHub, and it has a pre-filled thing with the panic dialog and with a panic stack trace, and your browser information, your operating system, and then template to fill in all the additional details about how you actually caused the panic. And then, yeah, so you can just hit reload if you want. Oh yeah, so we have auto generation of license notices. So now if you hit help and then go to third-party licenses, this shows a very giant text file with all the different license notices for the different software, for the dependencies. It's all just the Apache and MIT licenses. Kind of boring, but it's important that we're respectful of the open source software that we're using and displaying its license notices appropriately. And then let's see, foundations for folders next. So that one's actually kind of exciting. Let me make sure I'm in the right branch real quick.
Yeah, it should be the folder tree JS branch.
Yes, it is currently compiling. Give me just a second. Almost done. There
Also,
we go.
I can, as a filler, I can tell some funny stories.
We're good.
For example, we
Sure,
we
go ahead anyways.
As a main loop, we used a recursive function, and we actually exceeded the WebAssembly stack limit by having a function that recurses before returning back to the browser. So we basically, if you create an n-gon with 1 million edges, then it gets a lot of work to render. And we're actually starting to reach the limits of what the web browser can do and the SVG rendering platform. So we will absolutely in the future have to start development on our own rendering engine to fix those performance issues.
Yeah. So I just showed grouping. We have 2 different groups of things. And also now I can hit R, and I can rotate a group, and then I can type 45 and make it snap 45 degrees from the starting angle. So if I hit R45 again, it goes another 45, or R180, and it goes like that. I can also hit S and then scale it up and down, and then I can lock it to the X-axis or the Y-axis, and then I can say like -1, and that scales it by -1, essentially mirroring it. I can do it to any particular shapes that I select, even across groups. I can again do like SY minus 0.5, and that scales it negatively, so it actually flips it and goes by 0.5 of its height. And then I can also hit G, and then Y, and then let's say 100, or GX minus 100. Or I can do GX 100, and then I could just keep on tapping the minus key to make it go between negative and positive. And Also, I think there's snapping, so I can just hit R and then snap to 15-degree increments. So yeah, that is all of our features for this month. Going quickly back to the presentation. Just a quick update on the alpha launch plans. We have our website coming out in the next few days. That's actually pretty exciting. I'm really proud of it. And then hopefully this month, we will be in a state where Bezier shapes are ready, and I think we'll feel comfortable to release once Bezier shapes are up and running, because it's kind of hard to release a vector editor where you can't actually make anything besides primitive shapes. So quick preview of the website. Just gonna scroll through it real quick. Some of the text and stuff is still placeholder. I need to write a bunch of text, and that is exceptionally slow and difficult to do, as it would turn out. But you may be excited to see the various parts of the website. There will additionally be a couple more sections at the bottom that have not been added yet as well. But yes, look forward to that. And then we're going to be posting that on probably the Rust Gamedev subreddit, as well as probably just the full Rust subreddit. And we are looking for contributors. That is the main reason that we are launching the alpha version this month, because we're just trying to get the word out more and get more contributors to keep the ball rolling, and start accelerating our pace further as we move on towards the next major goal, which is actually the node graph system. That will be what we focus on primarily after the release of the alpha. And then after that, we will begin on, once we have a node graph, we will then finally begin with the vector-based render engine that will then also turn into a raster-based render engine, and then Graphite will be in its final form. Of course, it will have lots of additional work that will go on for many, many years or decades. True Doctor, do you want to mention anything else that comes to mind before we move on to questions?
I don't think so. We're good with time, so.
All right, and unfortunately this month I am going to make questions go into the Discord chat, but there are some pretty cool things going on there. So love seeing Graphite, and especially I think a lot of people loved seeing the website as well. So excited to see where it goes next month.
Yeah, me too. Thanks.
All right, so next up we have CW Fitzgerald here to tell us about Run 3D.
Yeah, so this is my project that I've been working on for a really long time, which is called Rend 3. And it is a 3D rendering library. It basically encapsulates all of the math and the nasty object resource management into a single library where you can use a very simple interface to add objects and materials and such into the world, and you can move around in the world, and you'll get all of the normal rendering features you'd expect from a 3D engine. The advantage is that it is independent from any framework or architecture, so we're not tied to an engine, we're not tied to being an ECS based or anything like that. The other big thing, and this is actually what I've been working on for the majority of the time I have been working on this library, is how to get this customizable. Because I can have a wonderful rendering library and that's all great, but real life applications need their own shaders, they need their ability to customize their rendering, but you also should be able to do that without immediately throwing away all of the things I provide you. So it is designed in such a way that it's easy to customize, and it's easy to customize in a way that doesn't hurt the it doesn't mean you have to throw away a lot of code. This is the core of the interface. It is very simple. You add meshes, you add textures, and then you take those textures and add them into materials, and then you take a mesh and a material and make them into an object. And once you have an object in your
All right, it appears that we are experiencing some technical difficulties. There we go, there I am. All right, so if CW doesn't make it back in just a second, let me just check Discord and see. In that case, no worries, we will hop right back in here momentarily. I'll just do my section right now, optimize for time and such. Let me just quickly get this set up. All right, so root and toot. Oh, right, I don't want my camera on. I need to change windows to here, and I need to change this window to. Oh, hello.
Hi.
Hey. We can toss you right back in. I was just gonna do my section, but if you are good to go, then no worries.
My Discord just completely froze.
You'd love to see it. Electron
And-
be like that.
And didn't actually tell me it froze.
Ah,
So
no
I just
worries.
kept talking.
Oh, good. Let me just set up streaming here again. Okay, so if you want, we can hop right back in. I can tell you which slide you were on, but I don't
Okay.
remember the exact context of what you're talking about.
Which
here, let me just-
slide?
It had like a lot of math on it. It was like a code screen with
Yes. Okay.
So
Wonderful. Okay.
and just if you just reshare your screen.
Oh yeah. Here we go. Okay. So
All good.
basically, the I'll go over the exact object model a little later, but the interface is intentionally very simple. But even with a very simple interface, because it is retained, you are able to get very good performance, and while retaining the simplicity in the API. And the question of why write another rendering library? What did you want to be different? I wanted a library that was easy to get started, because a lot of industrial strength, let's say, rendering libraries are extremely complicated and require you to know a lot about rendering to even use it. So I wanted something that was easy to use, quick to get started, but still had the power to do what needed to be done. And in addition, it needed to do actual photorealistic rendering, because that's a requirement for 3D graphics nowadays. Essentially, that you need to be able to do PBR materials, etc. This is also, I wanted to go a different direction than a lot of the other libraries, in that I wanted to embrace modern graphics APIs. Rend3 is built on top of WGPU, so we expose a lot of the more advanced features inside WGPU, including things which allows us to do things like GPU-based culling, which allows us to scale to much larger worlds than we would otherwise. I mentioned this before, we're framework agnostic, and I think maybe this is just a thing in the communities I'm in, but people often hyper focus on hyper-focus on the solving every single rendering problem possible, being the fastest, being the most efficient. Whereas what I really wanted is a library that is there for the normal people who to make a few compromises here and there, but it is easy to use, but still gets enough performance that you can use it for anything. This is actually the accidental. This is actually the accidental anniversary of Ren 3. I didn't realize it until I looked at when Ren 3 started, and it started exactly a year today. It started as this capstone project that I split out into its own thing, and this is actually the third iteration on this style of interface to a renderer. And to celebrate, we just released our newest version, which is 0.1, which sounds scary, but there were 6 releases before this, but they were in the 0.0 range because I wanted to be able to make quick changes to the API to allow for iteration. Now, enough talking because who cares, and let's look at a live demo. Let's hope this works. Alrighty. So this is actually showing off a... Oh no. Change window. Aha. There we go.
Hey, perfect.
Wonderful. Okay, so this is our default scene in one of our primary examples, which is a GLTF scene viewer. So you pass it a path to a GLTF, and it will render that GLTF. And we provide this default scene. You may have seen it before. I've posted it places, but this is actually a very GPU intensive scene. Each of these Suzanne heads is I think I applied some ridiculous subdivision surface to it, and I believe they're all about 40,000 vertices. So all in all, we're rendering something on the order of 10 of 5. I think it's 5 million vertices in this example, because you have to count, the shadow passes, etc. So this shows the directional lighting, the shadows, and PBR materials, including we don't have image-based lighting set up yet, but there is skyboxes, and yeah. Okay. So going to go back to here where I am actually not the only one using this library. There is someone else who is building a viewer for the second life world, and they're building it on top of Run 3, and they have been a source of tons and tons of feedback. And this shows how you can do dynamic texture streaming and deal with larger worlds than what I was showing off before. There's no sound, so. Note that this is actually a slightly older version of Ren 3. This was he put out this video about a month ago, so there's no shadows because there was an issue with the shadows at the time. So as you get closer to these images, it is actively swapping out the old ones with higher resolution ones so that it doesn't have to load the entire world all at once. One thing I'm going... actually, I'm going to show you the beginning, as you can see that this is actually what's happening. It's actively loading in all of the materials and textures as when it loads the scene, it's not doing any of this beforehand. And this is all done with that same very simple interface. You don't actually need a fundamentally complicated interface to do something like LOD streaming, which normally feels very complicated. One other note is that the performance of this scene here is actually very good. If I cause it to... My monitor is weird, so it will only cap at 144 frames per second if I'm looking at it. But if I full screen it and look away, you can see I'm getting 350 or so frames per second. Even with a complicated scene. There is frustum culling going on, which you obviously can't see because it works, right? And yeah, we'll move on. So this is very simple view of the object model of Ren 3, which is you have a bunch of textures, those go into a material, you have a mesh, and then you create an object with a mesh and a material. And the idea is that you can share meshes between different objects, which saves memory and also allows Ren 3 to do instancing behind the scenes. Additionally, the same with materials. You can, for example, make many objects that use the same material, and you save. Yes, you save. You only have one copy of all of those textures, and you can reuse textures across materials, stuff like that. This is a really easy to understand but really powerful model of how to deal with a 3D world. All of the handles are ref counted, so everything will be kept alive until either you kill it or all of its dependent objects dies. And because of the renderer world being separate from the user's code, the user's idea of the world, that allows it to have our idea of the world be separate from however you're storing yours. Just quick go over the crates. There's Ren 3, which is the core crate. This has the renderer and the renderer world in it. We have a system called called render routines, and render routines are basically the thing that actually does the rendering. And by having the render routine be external, but still have a default, we allow you to use this default when you're just getting set up. But then if you need to start modifying it, you can only modify the render routine, and the rest of Ren 3 will work alongside. And finally, there's Ren 3 GLTF, which is what Scene Viewer is using to load the GLTF. It can't support every single GLTF out there because you can really do some truly insane things with GLTF. But for most common GLTFs, it should work all right. I've tested it against a lot of the models in the sample repo. And so this goes back to what I was talking about before, is that we want this to be customizable. A pattern we use all over that is very powerful is that we give control to the user, but then we provide a default implementation for that, which means that it's really, really easy to use because you just grab that default implementation and you run with it. But when you need something else, you can go and implement it. And the reason you can go and implement it is because Ren 3 hides nothing. There is very, very little encapsulation going on in Ren 3 in terms of whether, and by encapsulation, I don't mean like things are well organized. I mean, you can actually go in and poke the bits that you need to poke. And the whole idea is that Rend 3 is not special. You should be able to go and re-implement that bit of functionality that Rend 3 has to your standards. If you have some other requirement, but you don't want to throw away all the other things that do fit your requirements, that allows you to replace that one component and then reuse all the old components. Finally, I actually don't know if this is finally, but because very few things are privileged, a lot of things are public, this is a massive Semver hazard. Because of this, it's going to look like the API breaks all the time. And this is a limitation of how Semver works with Rust, in that I can't have two different definitions of breaking, which is what I really want. I want breaking for people touching the internal APIs and breaking for people who are just using the APIs. If you are a user, there is very little chance. There will be some breakage, but it will be minor and easily fixed, versus there won't be any fundamental changes to that high-level interface that you were looking at before. We literally just released 0.1.0 about 20 minutes ago. So please check it out. It includes lots and lots of fixes. We've been making a lot of progress of late, and I am excited to share that all with you. Here's a list of current features and future things that I am interested in implementing. There is a more extended list in our GitHub issues that goes over a lot of this in more detail. Just search under the enhancements tag, and you can see all of the plans I have for improving Rend 3. And we need help. There's tons of work to do. There will constantly be tons of work to do. So we need help both in terms of contributors, but we also need help in terms of users. Use Rend 3, see how it is, and give us feedback. The only way we can make a really useful library is by getting feedback from our users and using that feedback to shape the APIs we build. And please speak up if you have any issues. You know I am active everywhere. And yeah, so if you want to get started, there are various links. These are mainly here for when the thing, we'll put it in the meetup announcements as well. And of course, you can always just find me on Discord or on the WGP Random Matrix under the same handle. And yeah, I just want to go through a couple acknowledgements for people who have helped me a lot recently. This is far from a complete list, so if your name is not on it, don't think I don't love you and appreciate you. Number one, Quark. I didn't save the slide. That's not English. For your tireless work on WGPU. I've sent many, many issues your way that got fixed way too fast, and I would never be able to do what I'm doing without your mentorship and support. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. He's not here, but John Nagel, he is the one who is making the Second Life viewer in Rend 3, and he has been giving me tons and tons of feedback. And so thank you so much, even though you may not ever watch this. And finally, Noxum, you are also using Rend 3, and you have also given me tons of feedback. So thank you for that, and for trying out a product that was in alpha. And there is, of course, countless other people I can't mention here. Questions? That's it. Yeah.
All right. Well, happy birthday to Rend 3. Great that it landed on today. Very convenient. And I'm going to have to push questions to the chat, but I think that there's been quite a bit of discussion. I do have one of my own questions, though. The John Nagel that worked on it, is it the same John Nagel that did Nagel's algorithm?
Actually, yes.
Oh, that person
Yeah.
caused us a lot of grief with Veloren because we couldn't figure out why some network stuff was happening, but also bless them for their work. So very cool to see they're working on this as well.
Yeah, it was. I found that out last night when I asked him about like how to describe him. So
Yeah,
yeah,
nice,
that's
nice.
super awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much. All right, so to finish off today, well, sort of, I'm going to double back afterwards, but we have some announcements that I want to go through. And so let me just make sure everything, okay, my Yeti's working, got my camera, okay, perfect. So first of all, Rusty Jam, this was mentioned a little bit during the demos today, but if you want, you can go and take a look at all of the submissions. If you go to itch, the jam is called the Rusty Jam, and you can take a look at what everybody was working on. The Rust Gamedev podcast, we do in fact have a new episode out, so make sure to go check that out. It is with the creators of the Mun language, and I sound kind of dumb with some of the questions I ask because I don't understand how all of the magic works, but it was super cool hearing sort of like their inspiration for creating Mun and a lot of like the technical sort of background for it. The Gamedev newsletter is out. If you go to gamedev.rs, you can check out the newest and greatest projects that are happening in the Rust Gamedev ecosystem right now. Trying to think, there was, oh yes, and so for contributions to the newsletter, we will be actually getting more community support. And so if you have something that you're going to want to add to the next newsletter, we're going to have a HackMD form that you can add a comment to, and then we'll make sure that you get pinged as soon as the issue for next month is created. So make sure to get in on that. And then also, I don't have a slide for this, but the RustConf is coming up. I just opened a tab to see when it was. I think it's on the 14th. But just a reminder that that is in a few days. So make sure to catch all the talks that will be going on. And so that's it for announcements. Now I'm going to hop back to something else here. Let me see if I can do this properly. So I want to window capture. Let's see. Oh, yes. Okay, cool. This does work. And now I just need to change over Discord. And I don't even know if I have audio enabled for the game. I might not. Actually, in fact, I feel like I disabled it. So we will be going no audio, unfortunately. But for my little show and tell this month, I do want to show off the new version of Veloren that is actually releasing today. And if you want to take part in the release party, is starting in about 30 minutes. I just sent out a ping on the Veloren server. I'm just going to alt tab out quickly to make sure. Oh yes, Kvark, I will get to you momentarily. I'm sorry I didn't have that on the list. That's my bad. Okay, so Veloren is dropping 0.11 today. We have a ton of new updates, and one thing I'm super excited about for our release party in 30 minutes is that we already have like 110 people online, and the release party hasn't even started yet. So the max that we've seen before is like 130 people online at once, and so I'm super excited to. Oh no, can I get up here? Okay, well okay, the airship is here. Perfect. So I'm super excited to see how many people we can go up to. On the Veloren Discord will be well, I guess like the Veloren Twitch channel will be streaming some dev content as the release party starts. So if you're interested, make sure you check that out. One thing that I'm super excited about with this release is that we've migrated a lot more over towards WGPU and Naga as well, and so this is something that I'm super excited about, just because our build times for continuous integration back when we were using like Spear v Cross and Shader C were like super large because it had to do external stuff, but Naga is like nice and clean. And so, anyways, there's probably a lot to show off, a lot of new features. We just, if you're on the Veloren Discord, you can see we just put out a blog post about what's going on. We have a trailer there. We have a lot planned for this release party, and so hope to see you there. I won't go too far into content with Veloren, but if you want to come check out the release party stream, there will be a lot more stuff there. All right, so Kvark, I'm going to pull you back in if you want to start speaking. Let me just toss this up on Chrome so that we can take a look at it. Window capture, we're going to go back to here. Where are we? It's a black screen right now. Oh yeah, because I minimized it or something. Yeah, okay. So Kvark will be running a meetup next month, a GFX RS meetup, and so there will be several different talks at this meetup. And I'm super excited for this because it's gonna be like super technical. It'll be very similar to the Rust Gamedev meetup, except it will be specifically just about rendering and graphics. Oh wait, Kvark, can you? Oh yes,
yeah,
okay,
just wanted to. It's not about GFX RS community. It's just about Rust and graphics. So if you have unrelated talks, we're happy to host them as well. This is experimental. We don't know how often it's going to be repeating, but we are excited for the upcoming talks. And in particular, there's going to be Rent 3 there. Thank you.
Yeah, and yeah, I've been super excited for this ever since Kvark said that they want to get something like this out, because I think it's awesome to see more and more meetups and presentations and stuff in the graphics community and the game development community. And so, yeah, reach out to Kvark if you want to potentially present something. It will be taking place on October 2nd at 1600 GMT, and there will be more details about that. As far as I know, it will be taking place on this Discord server with like a lot of the same setup, so same Twitch channel and everything like that. So stay in touch for that. Now that I'm gonna end off the meetup here. Someone asked in chat, is the Veloren announcement party or like release party gonna be recorded? I should be recording everything and then uploading it afterwards. And so yeah, you should be fine to check out any of the dev chats afterwards. All right, so in that case, I will see everyone next month, and hopefully we have some cool new stuff to show off by then.